What I'm going to do now is take all the strings off. And as these are the original ones, we really don't know how long they've been on. We've no idea how good, bad or different they are. So we may as well lose them for the sake of a set of strings cost. When I talk about strings, people often say, how often do you change strings? Well, it's a bit long, how long is a piece of string in many ways, because the longer they're on and the more you play them, the less they lose their tone, and to some extent their pitch, the intonation can go off. So to my mind, as soon as the strings have lost their natural tone, or they look grubby, or they just don't look immediately right, change them. Simple as that, you know. For some people with sweaty hands, you're going to wind up changing strings a lot. For people like me with quite dry hands, my strings last for ages, but it really comes down to how much you use them and how often you gig with them. Professional players very often change strings every gig. So, you know, if that's the case, there are ways and means of getting around this. You can buy multi-string boxes with 25 sets from D'Addarios and things, which work out incredibly cheap, sort of like £3 a set. And you can just keep them handy and rip out a new set whenever you need to. So I'm just going to get me wire cutters. I always chop strings so that they don't get reused and it's easier to get them off.
Yeah, I was just thinking of reusing those myself, Tom.
You don't really want to be pulling wound up coils through bridges like this. It's a recipe for scratching the hell out of a guitar, and you know, to what end? None whatsoever. So we'll use those bits. Strings have been put on correctly. You can generally pull them straight upwards like that. That's how they come off. So presto.
So what size type of strings are we going to put on this one?
We're going to put some 10 to 46s on this of Gibson branded but D'Addario made strings. Right. Useful tip for anybody who didn't know, Gibson strings or Gibson branded strings for electric guitars are made by D'Addario. And they're cheaper of course than buying genuine branded D'Addario stuff. So let's just put that aside for a minute. So next step really is just to give the fretboard an oil, because it's just straight out the factory. It's probably been polished by a polishing machine which has probably cooked the top surface to make it polished. And I'm going to use some proprietary lemon oil. This stuff is cheap as you like. You can get it from any music shop pretty much. A few quid and it'll last you for years. I mean, this lasts me for a year and I do it every day. So a bottle of the small bottle, this tiny little ones, are about £2.50 or something. So they cost very little and they work beautifully. Now then, what I do need is some kitchen towel. Oops. I tend to use kitchen towel rather than cloth because it's made of the same material as wood, and most of the lacquering is, you know, cellulose based. This of course is cellulose based. You know, you use it once and throw it away. It's a bit wasteful in terms of lots of paper loss, I suppose. And one could always recycle it, but it means if you use a cloth, you're probably throwing away more cloth unless you want to re-wipe all the guns you've taken off one guitar onto another one. So kitchen towel rules the day with me. You don't have to buy expensive stuff. Any old kitchen towel will do. I also tend to use some very fine gauge steel wool for doing fretboards with. And if you look at steel wool, you'll find it's got a grain as well. And if you run it in line with the grain, you tend to get lines on the fretboard. If you run it across the grain, you get less. So slosh and lemon oil on the fretboard to kick off with. This is not grubby, I'm not going to clean it first. You can afford to be liberal with this. It's a very similar constitution to the oil that you'd find in rosewood and ebony. And it helps to clean the fretboard, it helps to lubricate and seal up the wood. And because the wood is then stabilised, particularly against things like moisture, or a bit more protection at least, less inclination for your frets to pop out. So, across the grain. And I'm just doing this very light finger pressure, coming up against the frets gently either side. It really doesn't hurt to do this too often to your guitar. If you're changing the strings every day, you won't need to use steel wool, just use a bit on a cloth or a bit of paper like this. But the first time round, this just gets it into the system nicely and cleans up anything that actually happens to be there that you don't want, sealants or bits of lacquer or heaven knows what else that gets in the process when they manufacture these things in the Far East.
It's a good point actually. Yeah.
So, then I'm just going to wipe it straight off again, and that will leave quite a residue to get the bark off with a fresh bit of kitchen towel. Now, as a rule of thumb, this doesn't matter too much if it gets all lacquer. It does come straight off again, and it doesn't seem to do it too much damage. And indeed, if a guitar has had stickers all over it, you very often find that lemon oil is really a rather effective solvent for getting rid of it. Now then, beware, don't get too vigorous polishing these super shiny finishes because they will just mark up quicker than you can say boo.